Hello and welcome to another episode of Statford Bridge, Chelsea by the numbers. Bad number time. A few weeks ago, I talked about like having the alarm guy. Like if you've ever played those Assassin's Creed games or any of those like stealthy games where there's you're going to a village and there's a guy who's standing at the bottom of a conveniently placed alarm tower, and if you get detected he runs up to the top and rings the bell, but if you can get him before he starts ringing the bell, reinforcements don't come. And a few weeks ago I said that guy was kind of climbing up the ladder, but then Chelsea had a pretty good November and then he was all the way back at the bottom. He's back on the ladder. He's not at the top. He's not ringing the bell, but he's kind of climbing the first couple rungs. Chelsea lose 2-1 to Atalanta in another pretty brutal performance. I saw a stat from CFC Central that it's the first time Chelsea have conceded more than 1.5 XG in 3 consecutive games in multiple years. Which is actually somewhat surprising to me, but is not good. They lose 2 out of 3. They've not picked up enough points in the Champions League for the fixtures they've had so far. And most notably, I think the game went exactly the way every single person who watched the game and complained about things, it went exactly the way we all thought it would go wrong. Chelsea are winning at halftime. Josh Achampong has a very good game. That's not a surprise to anyone. Chalobah goes off at halftime because he's played a lot of games. Fine. He's replaced with Fofana. Fofana loses a free header at the back post. Very similar goal to the one Chelsea conceded to Arsenal. And slowly but surely over the second half, the legs go and people get tired and we get less and less and less and less and less running before a late winner, and Chelsea just give you nothing going the other way. If we look at things like the McClockbot match report, Chelsea are in yellow. And again, you can see they have moments. There's moments, but they never sustain pressure in that way. You can compare even the field tilt graphs. Chelsea don't have a sustained final third presence. Whereas Atalanta obviously do in the areas where the wingbacks are. They got around the outside of Chelsea reasonably well, whatever. Doesn't matter so much. But they did not get the final third stuff that they have gotten at points this season, and they really just create very, very little aside from one excellent João Pedro chance, and that's kind of it. Now, I don't actually want to talk about this game that much. I think the most difficult things is that 16 probably gets you into top 8. Chelsea's most likely points total now is 13.5. They play Paphos, who they should win, and then they play Napoli, which is a reasonably tough game. 16 should get them in. They will have to win both, and it is their own fault that they have to win both. And if they don't win both, then they can blame no one but themselves for the extra 2 fixtures that they will have to play, and they will not be able to rotate in. And that's just the reality of the situation. I think the more interesting thing to talk about is twofold. One, we're going to talk about the center backs, and particularly I wanted to spend some time talking about specifically why I dislike Tosin so much and tactically what happens there, and also give a little bit larger sample size data kind of in the big picture of what that looks like. And talk about those things. And the other thing to talk about is subs. And I think there's a lot of things that Maresca has left on the table in terms of subs and rotation, but I will start with the center backs. Yeah, I will start with the center backs. So, and we're not going to talk about the goals thing, which I thought I was going to talk about, but we're not going to talk about. So we talked with John McKenzie in preseason a lot about Chelsea's press, and we've talked on stream a lot about Chelsea's press. And the thing that stands out the most to me, and why I have been so adamant about it's Chalobah and Fofana, or it's Chalobah and Badiashile, and Chalobah and Achimpong, or it's Badiashile and Fofana, Badiashile and Achimpong. Like, those are the pairs you can run, is less about them, the players. It is about them, the players, but it's more about how their qualities interact with other people. Where Tosin is a completely fine center back for a whole lot of teams in a lot of ways of playing. He's a fine player. If Chelsea did not sign him, he would have gone to Newcastle, or he would have gone to West Ham, or he would have gone back to Fulham, all for similar wages to what Chelsea offered, and he would be fine. The problem with Tosin at Chelsea, specifically the way Chelsea play, is Chelsea play a fairly high wire defensive system. And by that I mean there is a lot of jumps in terms of players who have to recognize cue to jump one player to the next. There is a tremendous amount of load bearing placed on the center backs to give everyone else the structure to go. So what do I mean by this? If Chelsea are playing a very boring 4-2-3-1 team who are building 4-2, what this often looks like is that when the striker applies pressure and the ball goes to one center back, the winger is jumping. We've talked about this ad nauseum about Neto jumping or Garnacho jumping and so on, so on, so on. Chelsea are very man-marky in midfield. Sometimes there will be handoffs and trade-offs, but very man-marky in midfield. What happens when you have the winger jump, most frequently, is the winger gets played around to the fullback. Center back plays fullback, Neto's now out of the game. As that ball is traveling, the fullback is jumping all the way to the other fullback. That is a very large distance. To manage that, the center back on the ball side often ends up in the channel marking the winger. If you go and watch things like the Barcelona game, there are really clear cues where you can see Fofana goes all the way wide to pick up Rafinha or whoever it is whoever it is off the left, Ferran Torres, off of the left. And when the 10 makes the channel run, Caicedo picks him up and Chalobah stays on the weak side. Or sometimes it's Chalobah comes over and Caicedo picks up whoever on the weak side. But you end up in the situation where you are perfectly matched to man, but both of your center backs are in situations where if a player shows deep to the ball, they have to be able to mark very tightly, or if a player stretches in behind, they have to be able to track that run. Now, with someone like Fofana or someone like Chalobah, that works quite well. Both of those guys are pretty good following people into midfield and not getting rolled or not giving easy layoffs, and they'll foul if they have to, and sometimes they'll nip in and win it. But they very rarely get rolled cleanly, and very rarely does the 9 or 10 create enough separation from them to receive to feet, and the center back isn't applying pressure, so they have to play backwards or sideways with their next pass. At the same time, very rarely do they get done by like a double move and then a movement into depth from an attacker. Because of this, the line can stay very, very high. When you replace one of those players, so if Fofana is to become Tosin in this situation, you now end up in a situation where Malo Gusto is making a big jump to the fullback, and Tosin cannot mark a winger in the channel on the touchline. It does not work. It does not go well for him. So what happens is you have all these sorts of trade-offs of, okay, well, I can't really end up out there, so Caicedo might have to end up there. And now because your defensive midfielder has to go into the channel to cover for you and not the center back into the channel, when this player shows to feet, the 10 or the 9 or whoever it is, you have way less density inside. And because Tosin isn't as fleet of foot as other players, they're able to get the ball to feet very cleanly. And those moments I said where a 9 or a 10 creates separation from the center back and is able to receive, turn, and play forward are much more frequent. Simultaneously, the amount of times that such a player double moves to drag Tosin a few yards and then goes into space are much higher. The telltale for this, like the very clear moment that you will see this happen a lot, is where a ball will go into the channel and a 9 or a 10 or a winger or whoever will run onto it from the opposing team. And Tosin recovers, right? But he recovers into a situation where that player has gotten the ball into the channel, has taken their touch, and has squared up to attack the goal from the channel. Whereas that pass gets played with Chalobah, Fofana, Badiashile, Achimpong, and that player might beat them to the ball in the channel, but they're getting there in the channel with pressure on their back, being forced away from goal, and they might have to stop, recycle, and everyone at Chelsea can recover. And so what we see is, because of these moments where Tosin gets done, the same thing that used to happen with Thiago Silva, who was very, very talented, but had a history late in his career of being uncomfortable squeezing the line, is that the line drops 5 yards. And it's not a huge difference. It's not a huge difference, but it's real and it's there. And what happens now is, again, very visual. So if you're podcast only, like, you may want to check it out. It's hard to see. But you can imagine if your center backs are on the halfway line, the distance that your 6 has to cover and your 2 midfielders has to cover is much, much, much smaller. That your weak side winger has to cover is much smaller. But as soon as that backline drops 5, 7, 10 yards, because they just can't get there, well, now the space that Caicedo has to cover is much bigger. And because the space that Caicedo has to cover is much bigger, it's also much bigger for James and Enzo, who then act accordingly. And because they act accordingly, now all of a sudden you get done by playing into midfield, playing through midfield, getting played through the whole time. And I think games like Leeds, where Leeds is more direct play, but I think games like Leeds, where you end up with these big caverns where Chelsea vertically, from the highest pressing player to the deepest defender, are very stretched out. Their lines are extremely stretched along the length of the pitch. And you see they struggle to pick up second balls. You see they struggle to deny ball progression from players receiving in midfield. Where you compare that to the Barcelona, the Arsenal, the games where you're very happy with Chelsea's defensive performance, where the line is squeezed, the space between lines is very small, and yes, there's more depth to play into, but because the distances in midfield are so much smaller, the pressure on the ball arrives quicker, and because the pressure on the ball arrives quicker, the passes into players in midfield are sloppier, and so you get more turnovers for Chelsea, and you get less clean moments for the opposition to play through. And so you end up with this weird balance of, for Chelsea to defend the high wire way they want to defend, they almost need to lean into it more. They need center backs who can lean into it more. And Tosin can't lean into it more, because if he leans anymore, he's just going to fall over. He can't do it. And again, you want to be pretty cognizant of the limits and risks of on-off data with like not huge sample sizes. But in not insignificant minutes, I think the data matches the eyes pretty clearly. If we look, this is everything but the League Cup, because I don't have XG for the League Cup, and the League Cup would not look good for Tosin with the Wolves game. You have Chalobah's played 1790s all comps. You have Tosin's played 990s. You have Fofana's played 890s. In terms of XG against for Chelsea when they are on the pitch, Chalobah's at 106, Tosin's at 147, Fofana's at 101. So already you're talking about half a goal worse defensively when Tosin plays. And we could go through the strength of opponents here. Tosin is not playing Arsenal and is not playing Barcelona and is not playing Liverpool. Like, these are not those games. In terms of XGA when they are off the pitch, in the 490s, Chalobah has not played. 2.13 XG against. That is so bad. That is one of the worst defenses in the league when Chalobah does not play. Tosin, 1.12. That's a very respectable defensive team with Tosin off the field. Fofana, 1.47. With him off the field, Chelsea are much worse when Fofana and Chalobah don't play. And so in terms of plus minus, Chelsea's defense are a whopping 1 goal worse per game, expected goal worse per game when Chalobah does not play than when he plays. He makes the defense work because he can do the thing. He knits all the different profiles together because he can do all of the things. Huge difference. Tosin, on off, in terms of the defense only, 0.35. So they are a third of an expected goal difference on off worse. On versus off. And then Fofana, the defense is half a goal better, which is huge still. It is just very clear to me. And I didn't want to sit through and go through all the pairings because the minutes go down even more. But like the Chalobah-Fofana pairing has been very fruitful. If you look by goals, somebody DM'd me a stat that I think is probably worse now, but something like with Chalobah and Fofana on the pitch, Chelsea have conceded a goal every 300 minutes, and with Tosin on the pitch is every 47 minutes, something like that. Which is very difficult to manage. You cannot survive with those sorts of numbers. If you look at the XGD front, it's a similar story. The difference with Chalobah on the field versus off the field in all competitions, 1.2 goal difference per 90. He is helping in possession as much as he is helping out of possession. Fofana, 0.68, again, 2/3 of an expected goal difference, whereas Tosin, the team is worse by about 1/10 of a goal. So huge differences. And I added a note here. If you look at the Premier League only, for Chalobah's Premier League only minutes, they are a disgusting 2.3 expected goal difference, per 90 better with Chalobah on the field versus off the field. In 1390s, that's not nothing. That is humongous. That is a humongous amount of expected goal difference. It's such a large number. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense as a number. And it's real. I checked it. That is, over the course of a season, that is 76 goals, which is just a freakish number. So I think it's very clear, stop playing Tosin. He dropped Tosin until he had to bring him on against Atalanta. And I think that's our natural segue here, is once again, our friend Enzo Maresca left very much to be desired in the substitution factory. Chelsea make only 4 subs, one of which is at halftime with Trevoh Chalobah. And we see Garnacho come on for Neto. Malo Gusto comes on in midfield for Enzo Fernandez. And then Tosin comes for Wesley Fofana after he gets a stud in the eyeball. The number of strange injuries that guy picks up are frankly unbelievable, but it is what it is. The problem here, one, Chelsea were dead on their feet. That's kind of late for your subs. 2, he did not use all of his subs. 3, when Wesley Fofana goes off injured in a game that Chelsea are 1-1 away from home, in a game that a draw is okay, but a win actually matters significantly more than tying here, Wesley Fofana goes off. You have 3 right backs on the pitch in Josh Achimpong, Reece James, and Malo Gusto. And do we need to get into the weeds of like what is a right back versus whatever? You had three players who can play right back, but you had Josh who can play center back right there. You could have gone to Badishile Achimpong as a center back pairing, which has already played extremely well together against Liverpool. You could have moved Reece James or Malagusto to right back, and you could have brought on Andre Santos or Esteval. After the game, Enzo Maresca was asked about no Andre and no Esteval, and his comments were, if we had another sub, I would have brought them on for sure. Well, Mr. Maresca, unless I have forgotten how to count, I count 1, 2, 3, and 4. You have 5 substitutions, and you may say Chelsea used 3 windows. Well, the window at halftime doesn't count. So when you put that together, you could have used all of the subs, and you chose not to. And if it's because you didn't know you had another sub, that is worse. And so when I talked about the grades at the end of last season, and I talked about things to keep an eye on for this season, Maresca is really bad at subbing. I think there was a stat that came out today about how he has made over 5 lineup changes on average per lineup this season. One, I think that's extremely misleading because what frequently happens is he makes 0 lineup changes and then he makes 11. And that looks like he's changing 5 players a game, but it is not the same thing. And so I don't think that's a good way to look at it. I don't hate his like big picture rotation policy. I think he's actually fairly responsible with, I cannot kill some of these guys physically. If they go down, we're so cooked that like I can't put another 90 on Enzo here. I can't put another 90 on Trilobi here, or whatever it is. And I think that's actually reasonable and respectful and responsible, rather, not respectful. The problem to me is that sort of rotation, which it tends to be much bigger, I think is not a sustainable way for strong performances and consistency. When you think about one of the things that I think actually worked a little bit for the A team, B team thing last year is that the B team was a lot of the same guys. So they kind of fit okay together before they lost interest down the stretch where they were like, okay, we're just stuck in the B team. This is stupid. But at the beginning of the season, it was pretty consistently, this is the A team, this is the B team. So everybody was playing together and getting some whatever cohesion or chemistry or whatever you want to call it. But I think the problem when you have Champions League and you can't go A team, B team is all of a sudden you have guys who've never played together and you're running things pretty deep in terms of minutes, that I think a more pertinent rotation strategy is maybe something like you rotate the 3 guys on the right-hand side every time. Like it's always James and Gusto and Esteval, and then it's always Neto and Achimpong and Andre. And then those 3 guys who are covering for each other, interchanging with each other, moving with each other, are kind of always familiar. And you can chop and change based on performances and what you need and suspension and injury. But the intentional rotation keeps those like groups together, or you keep it's always Chalobah and Fofana, or it's always Badiashile and Achimpong. It's always Cucurella, Caicedo, Gittins, and then it's always Garnacho, Hato, Dasugo, or whatever it is, Lavia, who knows? Lavia's an apparition. But I think when you put those things together, it becomes much easier to do the consistent rotation. And I would like to see a lot more, instead of doing no changes, 8 changes, and then calling that an average of 4, I would rather see 4 changes, 4 changes. Kind of as things go along. And it's less A team, B team, and it's more like you're always changing 3 players to keep things fresh. The second half of this is that I think Maresca has done a very poor job of stealing minutes for players to keep minute loads down. Where if you look at some of Chelsea's bigger wins this season, uh he Chelsea just don't do a good job of getting saving minutes for guys that they could save in other places. Like if we go through the season worth of minutes, right? So if I go through the Forest game, triple sub at halftime, you are up 2-0. Does Enzo Fernandez have to play the full game up 2-0 against Forest? Like, you get 3-0 at 84. Do you need to do... Well, you've already used all 5, so it is what it is. But does Enzo Fernandez have to play the full game at 2-0 against Forest? And this was a message I got from Pano Footy, who just has like a big list of them here where... and I'll pull some of them up, like West Ham. The score at the 51st minute is 5-1. Sorry, the 58th minute is 5-1 against West Ham. In that game, you have Enzo Fernandez plays a 90. Moises Caicedo plays a 90. Pedro Neto, who you are going to play a lot, plays a 90. Do you really need to do all of those things? Can you not be a little bit more conservative with those substitutions? Like, does Reece James really need to come on and play the last 20 minutes of that game? So on. What other ones do you have in us here? Fulham. You're 2-0 up, 56th minute. Enzo Caicedo, Cucurella all play full 90s. Enzo Fernandez starts against Lincoln. Forest was the one we just looked at. Wolves, you are 2-0 up at 65. And you don't make a second sub until 77 when you're 3-0 up. Enzo Fernandez plays 83. Cucurella, Caicedo play full 90s. Like, is that really the one? Is that really the thing? And when you think back to, like, this will be a super deep cut, but if I go back to, like, Liverpool from last season, right, which is going to be a crazy deep cut. But if I go to the beginning of last season from Liverpool, right, the thing that everyone praised Arne Slot for and gave them a lot of kudos for, if you go look at the games early in the season where they win 2-0 against Ipswich and you look at the subs, it's, can they save 15 minutes on Trent's legs? Can they save 15 minutes on Robertson's legs? Just kind of one off. And you can go through the whole list of Liverpool fixtures from that season where just they save 15 minutes here, they save 15 minutes there. Trent goes off 72. As soon as they get the second goal, triple sub. Can you just save minutes here, 15 minutes there, 30 minutes there? And I just think when you look at Maresca over the course of the season of managing a full squad of however many players who have to go from have to go through a 60-game season, unless you're going to have a huge squad of really, really talented depth. And the reality is that Chelsea have a squad of some depth, but some of them aren't that good. Delap is not that good. Andre Santos has not quite translated as well as we thought he was, and that's fine. He's young. He'll get better. Hato's not that good. Your attacking talent, I think, in this game against Atalanta, the front three, or the three wingers who played, Garnacho, Gittins, and Neto, put up a combined 0.47 XG plus XA. That's just, it's not enough. Unless you're going to have really, really talented depth, you need to steal as many minutes as you can. You need to play as many minutes with George and with Gittins and with Hato that you can steal everywhere you can steal. And I don't think Enzo Maresca has done a great job of that. Chelsea play on the weekend against Everton at home. I think this has become, if not a must-win, awfully, awfully close. And then they'll be able to rotate very heavily against Cardiff in the Cup. But again, that's an away match against a not terrible team that if you play a real stinking lineup and it gets tight and you have to bring guys on and then you got to go away to Newcastle and then you got Villa and Bournemouth and City and it's a real murderer's row after that. So we will see. I think Chelsea are a very momentum-driven team, but we will see how it goes. Anyways, that is all from me. And as always, enjoy the soccer.